And hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Alicia, and I am here today to continue the book club that I've been hosting just about every Sunday evening. And the book we are covering is How to Be an Adult in Relationships. And this is the 5 Keys to Mindful Loving by David Richo. David Richo is a therapist, just like I am, and he wrote a book. And I think it's so wonderful that therapists are engaging in disseminating information in digestible chunks. And I think text like this really helps us to clarify what is healthy and what is not healthy, what validates us as individuals and what invalidates us as individuals. And part of what we do as therapists is we connect with people and we have people process all the different ways in which you are not behaving as your true authentic self. So one really main purpose of therapy, and in particular couples therapy, is to be authentically yourself without the invasion of a lot of different expectations, external expectations on you, that you can live your life in a calm, confident way. And so the purpose of therapy is for empowerment, for all of us to step into our power, and because we are powerful individuals. And so that's my hope for everybody who tunes in and connects with me just about every Sunday. Every Sunday that I have free, I'm really dedicated into going through a lot of these books. And so far, this is part 4. I included the other parts 1, 2, and 3. It's in the show notes. So if you're interested in going back and listening to other discussions that I've had about the book, How to Be an Adult in Relationships, 5 Keys to Mindful Loving, you can go back and you can listen to those recordings. But I just want to introduce myself to you again. I'm Dr. Alicia. My website is Coaching with Dr. Alicia. I am a psychotherapist, and I'm also a college professor. So I train individuals, adults, on how to become therapists. I also do a lot of work in supervision of students, but I also supervise new professionals in how to incorporate into this world, indoctrinate into this world of therapy. And then, and I'm also a healer, right? So I have my certification in trauma, healing trauma certification. And I just am interested in disseminating this information in really good texts that have laid out a lot of foundational principles of how we're supposed to treat each other. And gosh, I would be remiss not to talk a little bit about some interesting things happening in the news. Part of it is what happened with presidential candidate Donald Trump. A very unfortunate, really traumatizing, almost life-threatening incident happened. And no matter where you are in your political orientation, we don't want to see another person get injured. And innocent people were killed and or unalived. I think that's what we're supposed to say. Innocent people who were unalived as a result of not being an adult in relationships, right? It's dealing with and processing this. And I know maybe I'll do another podcast on this, but one thing I will say is that if you look at the history of presidential candidate Donald Trump, you will notice that he's had a lot of trauma in his past. So if you ever see some of the things that he's spoken about, some of his orientation, a lot of it comes from how he was raised and the messages that he got about empathy or lack thereof, and a lack of compassion. And some very, very interesting things happened to him when he was younger. Particularly, one thing I want to highlight is the abandonment that he experienced from his mother at an early age. So these are just some things to keep in mind. If you're ever curious about how and why people do what they do, start digging into their background, and you can be able to tell how and why people behave the way they do. And this book really talks about just that. It lays out a really good theory about all of the things that all of us need to feel whole as adults, right? And those things are the 5 things. And I know I wrote it down so that I don't have to try to remember it. But all of the things that we need as children from our parents are 5 major keys. And that is attention, appreciation, acceptance, affection, and allowance. These are the 5 major keys that all of us need in relationships. If you're interested in digging into what those mean, these key indicators of a loving, healthy, loving relationship, go back to my previous discussions on this. And those links, again, are in the show notes. You will find it in there. Part 1, 2, and 3 is in the show notes. Today, we are in part 4. Let's get right to the book. I am on page 39 of this book. This is after David explores all of the 5 keys to mindful loving and healthy loving, right? And now he's going into a part of the book that really outlines how is it that we as adults aren't giving these things to each other and particularly to our children. So he's looking at, in this next part, the unconditional presence versus the 5 mindsets of the ego. And he's talking about these ego things that interrupt our ability to give what is essential to another person. So we'll go into that now. Let's start. He says here on the bottom of page 39, if any of you guys want to get the book and read along with me, that would be really nice. I got notes and stuff in the margins, Anyway, so it might be kind of cool to read along. You can get a paper copy. It comes in an audiobook version, and it also comes on Kindle. So it might be something you might want to pick up and read along. So he talks about the 5 A's. And again, I want to list them out again one more time. The 5 A's is attention, appreciation, acceptance, affection, and allowance, right? So in giving those things, they are components of unconditional presence, a witness. So what does Donald Trump need right now? He needs all 5 of those, right? What do the people in that audience that experienced something totally traumatic, potentially traumatic event of having a person who comes to this rally to support their candidate, whatever that means to them, and then to have somebody lose their life? What do the family members of the attacker, of the victims of what happened yesterday, what do they need? They really do need unconditional presence because they really need a place to process what's happened to them. So that's something to keep in mind here. But what he's saying is that there are also 5 major mental habits that interrupt authentic, unconditional presence. And what happens is that this causes others to feel unloved. They are virtually involuntary mental reactions that are common to people the world over. So this is everybody. We all need to be mindful in how we're not providing the acceptance, the allowance, the attention. What are some of the things that gets in their way? And he's saying that there are 5 different things that interrupt this necessary process that all of us need to feel whole and to feel good about ourselves. We need a space to have this, right? These mindsets are like bullies um, who enter unbidden and intrude upon our pure experience of the present and of the people we meet there. The spiritual practice of mindfulness is a rescue from the siege of these invaders. What are these invaders? There are 5 fundamental mindsets of ego that interrupt our ability to be here and now and that distort reality. Distort reality. Okay, here are the 5 things. Number 1, fear of or worry about a situation or person. I perceive a threat in you, or I am afraid you may not like me, so I am on the defense, right? So being defensive interrupts your ability to be present and to be mindful with your loved ones, right? This is what happens when we get triggered by what someone is saying. So when someone is talking and we are supposed to be in the position to give them full presence, mindful interaction with them, sometimes the content of what they say could trigger something in us. And so that takes us away from being able to give the 5 A's. Okay. Secondly is desire, that this moment or person will meet our demands or expectations. So we're looking for something out of that experience, okay? Grant us our needed emotional supplies or fulfill our wishes. I am trying to get something from this or you. So what takes us this way is that you are making it all about you instead of all about the person receiving. So for example, suppose you have a child that comes home from school and they're sharing a story of maybe someone bothered them on the bus on the way home. And as they're sharing that story, you interrupt them and you start talking to them about your bus experience when you were growing up. So what you're doing is that instead of making it about them and their experience, you have switched the conversation and made it about you and your experience. So that interrupts presence, mindful presence. So, okay, so that's number 2. Number 1 is triggered, right? If a partner comes home and he wants to tell you about some lady at work that bothered him, and you get triggered by that because maybe you have some complicated feelings about that relationship. So therefore you start getting defensive and you think that that person's talking about you, and they're not talking about you. They really want to share an experience, right? So that could be a good example of being triggered by something because maybe there's some insecurities there about your partner and his work relationship with another person. I mean, these are just examples of how you are not an adult in relationships, right? Okay. So the third reason why we are not adults in relationships is we become judgmental. Judgment can take the form of either admiration or criticism, humor, moralicism, positive or negative bias, censure or labeling, praise or blame. I am caught up in my own opinion about you or this. I think we need to resist the urge to, hold on, somebody's texting me over and over again. Just a second. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Okay. All right. So somebody was interrupting me and texting me. Anyway, so hello, everyone. Let me reset. I'm Dr. Alicia. We're coaching with Dr. Alicia, and we are talking about all the different ways in which you are interrupted. And I got to give you my mindful presence, and I keep getting interrupted by messages that I'm getting from people. Okay. So anyway, so judgment. me being caught up in your own opinion about what's happening. We have to resist the urge to label things. And I am really bad at that, right? As a therapist, all I do every day is diagnose and treat and label. That's part of my orientation as a therapist, is to label things, is to judge things, in a sense, a clinical judgment. So I have to learn that when I'm present with the people who I love, to turn off that sense of judging, of saying, wow, that's really wonderful, or wow, that's really terrible, or labeling things, allowing the person to be able to explain and explore their experience without me putting my own thoughts and feelings on there. So, okay, so those are the three things that take us away from being an adult in relationships. Number one is being triggered by what someone is telling us. Number two is when there's someone sharing a story, you turn it around and make it all about you instead about them. And number three is something that I had to learn, and that's not to label things, not to label them and to say that it's great or it's bad or it's wonderful, to withhold labeling things. Okay, so the fourth thing is control. Fourth, control is what keeps you from being an adult in relationships. So control happens when we force our own view or plan on someone else. I am attached to a particular outcome, and I am caught in the need to fix, to persuade, to advise, or to change you. This is what happens a lot when parents have the tendency of lecturing their children. You know how children want to share. It's the whole idea of children should be seen and not heard. Well, you have to resist that urge, right? Because children, when they come home from school, they need to be able to share. They need to be able to talk and to tell you about what's happened with their day, and resist the urge to stop children from talking and sharing and get into a position of lecturing. Here's what you need to do. Here's what needs to happen. I mean, I think that as parents, it is our job to guide children, and there's plenty of times to do that. But I think you need to open this space in being an adult in your relationships, is to, instead of lecturing someone and wanting to fix it, it is important to give them space to just get it all out, right? And in romantic relationships, y'all know what I'm talking about. Romantic relationships, if you're sharing with your partner a situation or something uncomfortable, you don't want your partner to just give you the answer. Well, why don't you just do this? Well, no, listen to my entire story before you jump in and want to fix it, right? So y'all know about that. So those are things that get in the way of being an adult in relationships, because according to David Richo, being an adult in relationship means you're not going to want to jump in and fix things. You're going to have to resist the urge to give an answer. Okay. All right. So the fifth issue that happens when we are not an adult in relationships is the illusion overrides reality and may occur as denial, projection, fantasy, hope, ideation, depreciation, or wish. I have a mental picture of or belief about you or this, and it obscures what you are really like. The central illusion in life is that of separateness. So this is what happens when it elicits a feeling in you. Maybe when someone's trying to talk to you about what's going on with them, we sometimes turn it around and make it into something that it's not. And it can be very frustrating to not be able to hear the content of what they're saying and then just judging things. So these are the 5 issues that distort your ability to be adults in relationships. Let's go through them again. For all of you all just joining, I'm Dr. Alicia. I'm going over the book, How to Be an Adult in Relationships. I've already talked about, this is part 4, so I've already talked about all of the key 5 keys to mindful loving. You can go to the show notes and look at 1, 2, and 3. This is episode number 4, and we are talking about what gets in the way with us being an adult in relationships. Hello, everybody in the chat. I also want to remind you that if you text love to 87948, you get on my list. You also get a free copy of my husband's book. And he talks about relationships a lot. and you have a free copy of one of his books, Financial Lovemaking. And then I'll also send you some free stuff as well. So you can go there. Text love to 87948. So we are just talking about, to summarize, we are talking about what are the 5 things that happens that gets in the way with you being an adult in relationships. And those 5 things are being triggered by what someone says. So fear, eliciting fear, a desire to make it all about you instead of about them, to label things and people, to get into this lecture mode. Okay, as parents, we want to lecture our children instead of actually listening to their experience, right? And then when things start coming up for us as a feeling in us, and we're uncomfortable with those feelings, sometimes we can do all sorts of defense mechanisms like denial, projection, come into fantasy, hope, depreciation, and saying, I have a mental picture of who and what you are, and I'm not going to let you tell me about who you are. I'm going to come to my own conclusions about you. And so just to talk about this, what David Richo is discussing is that what's needed in human relationships in order to connect with somebody is to give them the 5 A's. And that is, let me go through them. That is attention, appreciation, acceptance, affection, and allowance. That this is what all children need when they grow up, and that some of the difficulties that you have currently in adult relationships, he is saying, is connected to a failure in your household of receiving those things. So you have this innate desire to be heard, to be accepted, to be allowed to be yourself, your unique person, and that some of that gets played out in our current relationships. So that is what his whole entire thing, and it makes sense, as a therapist, that absolutely makes sense. Okay, so let's move on. Any of these interruptions, any of these 5 interpretations by the editorial board of your ego, these are your ego that's interrupting your ability to connect with other people authentically. But they still interfere with our experience of the present. You're not in the present. And mindfulness requires you to be present, not thinking about all these other things, but be present with somebody. Each is a minimization that imposes our personal dramas upon reality and makes fair witnessing impossible. So you can't really witness. Think about what these experiences of people who were at that Trump rally. Think about how they need somebody to witness what they've experienced. Now, I'm not, political ideology aside, these are still sentient beings who attended a Trump rally and did not expect to lose their life, did not expect to have something traumatic like that happen. They need witnessing. They need someone to witness what they've experienced and someone to hear what they saw, how they felt, all of these things. They need to process this. And I would even venture to say that even Donald Trump needs a witness of how he experienced what he experienced. He needs a place to process this. And you know what my hope is for the world? That maybe an experience like this would unite a country that's clearly divided. And I don't know, y'all, what do y'all think? We need to be united. We are the United States of America. And I think we need to be united. And my hope, and I'm not giving up hope. My hope and my belief in the world that maybe an instance like this would help unite all of us. because I think we're divided. And honestly, when I talk to people who support Donald Trump, they're wonderful people. You know what I mean? They have gotten information that's different, and they've interpreted the information that they have received differently from other people who are in support of Biden, or people who are independent, don't support either party. I think we need to do more mindful loving, and we don't get enough of that. And we especially don't get enough of it in our community. And partly is because we don't receive it from the larger society. Every time we experience a painful thing, we get gaslighted, we get blamed. And so I think this is a really good handbook, not only for how you need to treat people who in your circle and other individuals. This is how the country needs to treat people. Like, we as a United States of America needs to treat each other this way. And I'm happy with, you know, conspiracy theories aside, I am really, really happy with the response that all of the politicians have been given to this horrific event. I put it up on my page in my stories on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram, by the way, at Coaching with Dr. Alicia on Instagram. You can find me there. And I put it up on my story, a beautiful quote from Barack Obama, how he was like, this is terrible. You know, I think all of us are finally on the same page about how awful this experience was. So anyway, it's in the spirit of mindful loving that I feel like we need to go forward with this really horrific thing that's happened, right? So in this sense, they are causes of karma. He gets into karma. The gate to enlightenment opens when mindfulness closes down the show for even a moment. That means eliminating distractions that you have in your head about why you're not giving people the space that they need so that they can know you, so they can connect with you, right? The gate to empathy and compassion. Empathy and compassion. These are two things that Donald Trump did not get when he was a child, by the way. If you look at his history and some of the experiences he had with his mother in particular, who abandoned him. And it wasn't her fault. She had an illness or something, from what I understand. He was abandoned by his mother at a really young age. I can't imagine what that's like for a child not to have that, and that his father was really cold and emotionally distant from him. And so he did not receive the empathy and compassion that he needed, but he needs it now, I'm certain, right? The gate to empathy and compassion opens when we see human experience, no matter how unsavory or disfigured, without the mindset of judgment and fear. At both gates, we announce the open sesame, the unconditional yes to that person's reality. This is not a place in adult relationships where we need to take someone's real lived experience away from them. And empathy means, it doesn't mean you agree with somebody. It doesn't mean you would do the same thing that that person has done, but not judging someone and allowing that person to tell you how they felt, what they experienced, that is empathy. It is not agreement. Okay? But compassion is what comes out of, I could totally understand if I was in your shoes and experienced what you experienced. I can't tell you I would do anything different. I have compassion for what you've been through. Okay? The 5 mindsets are not to be construed as bad. Each of these pirates is full of energy that can be recruited for the unsinkable schooner of mindful love. The task is not to disown the mindsets that take you away from being an adult in relationships, but to redirect their energy so they can serve us and others. Sometimes it's not the time to judge. It's not the time to lecture. It's not the time to control situations. Sometimes you have to give space for someone else to share their reality without dismissing them, diminishing them, or pushing them away, or making them feel there's something wrong with them, right? The task is not to disown these mindsets, but to redirect their energy so that they can serve us and others. This fear can be mined for wise caution. I really like this because I would say probably about 85 to 90% of my clients have anxiety, right? Anxiety is what usually puts people in my door, right? Who say, I'm having this crippling anxiety, I need help, right? So a lot of people reach out to me when they start feeling this anxiety. But one thing I want to tell them is that nervous anxiousness, you don't really want to get rid of it totally. The problem with anxiety is that it just becomes out of control and it becomes crippling. Remember, the feeling of anxiety, and we don't have enough time here for me to get into the biology of it and cortisol and all of that. But in a nutshell, anxiety is there to protect you, and you need to become friends with it, right? So when it's time for me to do my taxes, I start feeling anxious, right? Because that anxious feeling is what motivates me to start contacting my tax advisor and start filling out those forms. And then once I get it done, the anxiety goes away, right? So that's an instance of anxiety motivates me. Like, oh my God, I got to make sure I carve out time to get my taxes in order, right? So anxiety is a good thing, but when it becomes crippling is when, yeah, I do everything, I fill out my taxes and I'm still worried. Like there shouldn't be residual worry, right? So that's where anxiety, you have to understand that it can serve you. Sometimes these things serve you, but sometimes it becomes crippling. And that's where I usually see a lot of clients in my office, and we talk about, how to get rid of those things. So if you're interested in working with me, you can go to my website, coachingwithdralicia.com. Anxiety is just a terrible thing to live with. And there are tricks and things that you can do to help you control that, right? So he goes on to say, fear can be mined for wise caution, right? So fear is a good thing. Pay attention to your body and how you're feeling because something could be coming, right? So fear is a good thing. It helps to protect you, right? Desire makes it possible to reach out, okay? Judgment includes intelligent assessment, right? So that's what I do as a therapist. I'm judging the situation. I'm working with couples and I'm judging what's happening here, what's going on here. I'm making judgments, right? So judgment is really actually very useful in my field, but it's not useful when I'm trying to allow someone to share their experience, right? Don't come to conclusions, but it's a gift. Being able to have wise judgment, caution, to be able to reach out to someone. And judgment includes intelligent assessment. So you don't want to cut off judgment totally, right? So control is necessary in most daily activities. Yeah, we need to have a certain amount of control about what we do every day, because how would you get tasks done? Fantasy is the springboard to the imagination and creativity. The most creative person I know is my husband. He lives in a fantasy sometimes, but he's turned it into a skill that helps him to become very successful. And sometimes I'm like, Boyce, I need your imagination. Please help me out of situations. So I turn to him just for, how are we going to be creative? I got this problem. I need to creatively get out of this problem. He's very useful in that, by the way. So I'm real lucky to have him in his creative imagination. He's got a great imagination, very brilliant mind. Okay. When we find useful kernels of these mindsets, the trespassers can become our bosom buddies, make friends with all of the things that we talked about that interfere with your ability to be present. You have to have control over it and know how to turn it off and to turn it on for healthy living, right? We cannot provide the 5 A's as long as these 5 mindsets are engaged, because they distance us from authentic contact and suspend or disable direct perception of reality. So what he's saying is that throughout this book, these 5 mental defenses are referred to as layers or overlayers of the ego. So he gets into, and I don't have time today to talk about ego strength or whatever, but yeah, these are aspects of the ego that can get in the way. We cannot stop our minds from engaging in distractions, But mindfulness is something you practice, reduces the impact and helps us catch ourselves in the act. Mindfulness is the watchdog, or rather the seeing eye dog of the psyche, watching out for raiders of reality and walking us safely past them. This is what helps us, right? To be able to love another person is not to diminish their experience, is to allow their experience to be heard and validated, right? When we come to others with the 5 A's, we are profoundly present and closeness happens. This is empathy. And this is what intimacy means. If you want to connect with somebody, you're going to have to be able to allow them to talk about their experiences. That's how you connect with them. And that connection is what increases, it increases intimacy in a relationship, right? It increases empathy and intimacy. When we come at others with the 5 mindsets, we are caught in a personal agenda and distance happens. So according to the Gottman, I don't know if y'all know about Gottman, John Gottman, he thinks that he prescribes that couples on a regular basis, he feels that couples need to give each other time and space on a daily basis, of which they can have a stress-reducing conversation. And it's fascinating because he thinks that this 5 minutes a day can help save a relationship, that you give your partner at minimum 5 minutes out of every single day for them to come home and have a stress-releasing conversation with them. Yeah. And to do that, we have to provide the 5 A's. When we come at others with the 5 mindsets, we are caught in our own personal agenda and distance happens. This is why you think, I can't really connect with my partner. What's going on that we're not connecting? We're like roommates every day. We don't really talk to each other so much. You're not having these conversations. So this is the answer. All relationships out there where you feel like you're growing apart and you're becoming roommates, you're lacking this. Okay. The commitment to intimacy is a transition from the ego's favorite resorts to the paradise of mindful love. Then we can say to one another, I am most myself when you are here. That most will feel like a releasing of the most love in us. The unconditional presence of someone who loves us is also harkens back to the past, and it repairs our childhood sense of being unwanted. Just because you had a certain childhood that was not ideal, it does not mean that you are just a damaged person going on with your life. Just because you see people and you hear about their story, and you pass judgment on them. Oh, she didn't grow up with a dad in the house, or oh, he grew up with an abusive parent, and you start making those judgments on people. You're putting them into a box and you're not honoring their experience. And believe it or not, I absolutely believe that this is the beauty of relationships currently, that no matter what your past, you can have a healthy relationship. You can grow up with deplorable conditions when you were young, but you can heal in your current relationships if you think about these things, right? This is the key to having a great, healthy relationship now, no matter what your past is. I do not believe your past has to dictate exactly who and what you are right now. I think you can pick and choose who and what you want to be. At the same time, no human can or is expected to be fully unconditionally present all the time. Yeah. So this is why I say you can't do this all the time, but it's so important to carve out times where you can be present, mindfully present with your significant other. And you know what? As I'm talking about this, I really do believe that this is the key to dating. Okay, so one question I get a lot from people is, Dr. Alicia, I want to start dating and I don't know how to go about it. Like, how do I date? What do I do when I'm on a date? How do I get men to like me? I've had a lot of women fill my intake out, and a lot of them. How do I get people to like me? What's going on? I keep picking these men, and I want to connect with someone. I'm lonely. I want to connect with my partner, or I want to meet somebody. I'm telling you, if you can memorize these 5 A's and practice them, you can get just about anybody to fall in love with you. You can get anybody to be interested in you because you need to be interested in them. And how do you do that? You pay attention. When you're on a date with somebody, what do? Put your phone down. You're present with them. Let's go through the 5 A's. This is the key to dating. Y'all want to know how to date and how to get people, how to put your best foot forward? It's not that difficult. Give them the attention, undivided attention. There's nothing terrible than going on a date with somebody and they spend the whole time on their phone or taking selfies. I don't know why that bothers me. We're on a date. Don't take a selfie right now. Let's me and you get to know each other, right? So attention. Appreciation, right? So you're paying attention, you're listening for things that you can appreciate about that person, right? And you can articulate, wow, I really appreciate this about you. If you try hard enough, you can find positive qualities in everybody. You are accepting them, right? Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you're accepting them. Affection. You could, oh, do you mind if I hold the door open for you? If I hold your hand? These are things you can do on the first date that can make people like you. I mean, I want it to be authentic. I don't want it to be like you're manipulating somebody, but this is the key: showing affection and allowance, letting that person be their own unique self. That's allowance, allowing someone to be unique. Wow, you're unique, seeing their uniqueness. If you do these 5 things on a date, that person will want to go out on another date with you. So I advise that if you are interested in somebody, that you practice these things. And yeah, it does sound deceptive. KB strong. It does sound deceptive, but I want it to be directed towards somebody you genuinely are interested in. So if you're interested in someone, you give them this. Believe it or not, these are the tactics that a lot of con artists do to deceive others. So it's a double-edged sword in a way. It can be used to manipulate, but I definitely am not encouraging us to manipulate others at all. I want us to use this in a very authentic way, to be mindful in how we date, because that will help us learn. And you need to look for somebody who's able to give you those things. It's a give and take. It's not just you sitting there listening to another person. That would be deceptive, right? So I think that we need to keep that in mind. So this is the key. Anybody wants to know what to do when you're on a date and how to get someone to like you, and if you like them, these are the things that you do. Okay, so let's move on here. Can't remember where I left off. Okay. All right, let's go on to mindsets. These mindsets, by the way, I want to recap the mindsets. The mindset, there are 5. Okay, let me recap for everybody. The 5 keys to mindful loving are attention, appreciation, acceptance, affection, and allowance, right? The 5 things that keep us from being an adult in relationships are being triggered and fearful by what someone's telling you, making the discussion all about you instead of listening to them, labeling things, being judgmental. That's the 3rd thing. The 4th thing is lecturing to something. Nobody wants to be lectured to, especially children. They want to be heard sometimes and not lectured at. And the 5th thing is coming up with what I would call ego defenses, like being defensive and playing into fantasy instead of reality of what another person is saying. So those are the things that get in the way. And if you do these things in relationships, the other person's not is going to resent you for it, right? The other person is going to feel lonely, and there's going to create distance in the relationship. So I guarantee you, any of you all in relationships who feel distant from your partner, there's some of these 5 things happening that's keeping you from being in a mindful, loving place with your partner. All right. So what he's saying is that these 5 mindsets that move you away from being an adult in relationships, these mindsets are minimizations, since every reality and person is actually an infinite field of potential, a vast open space beyond limit. And that is something I really think we need to teach our children. Our children are limitless. I wish I can convey this to my own children in an energetic way that I want to. Like I was telling my son the other day, like, your name is Quincy because that's what I called you, but you are more than Quincy. You are any and everything you could possibly want to be. It's just that I gave you the name of Quincy, but know that you are any and everything that you want to be. So you respond to Quincy, but know that you are bigger than just you. And you are just a sentient being. You're living in your body, but you are a limitless person. And y'all go watch that movie, Limitless. There's a whole movie on it. And that movie is fire. That movie is really, y'all, movies really, if you're astute, movies give you the answer of how to become anything you want to be. And that movie, Limitless, is a great movie. It's a great movie for stepping into the power that all of us have, especially Black people. We got power. I was just watching another show called on Netflix last night. I fell asleep on it. It was called Super Sale. I mean, it is talked about how Black people are superheroes. We're limitless, right? Okay. Without mind conjured limits, all is perfect and exuberantly provocative, just as it is. Don't need to change. Joy is the energy that happens in freedom from mindsets. This is the key to joy. You want to bring joy in your life? Be mindful of how you are creating distance among the people who are important to you. And when you're mindful of that and you are observing when that happens and you correct yourself, that is how you experience joy. Wow. We no longer feel obliged to figure out what people are up to. We are finally free to be fully mindful. Listen, there's a responsibility that comes from trying to fix things. There's a responsibility to stepping in and inserting yourself. You're not responsible for other people. You're just there just to listen. So why put that pressure on yourself, right? We no longer feel obliged to figure out what people are up to. We are finally free to be fully mindful, present with no need to solve, explain, judge, or control. Give it up. And the best way to deal with anxiety is to give up control. I've had clients talk to me about what if this happens, and what if that happens, and what if this happens? And my answer to that is, it's always possible that those outcomes could be there because you can't control that. You want to control things that it is impossible for you to control. So sometimes gaining control means you need to release yourself from control of things that you have no say so. You can't control what your kids do, what your parents do, what your spouse does. Giving up that control is actually a liberating experience. Okay, so we are finally free. There's a freedom that comes when we are mindful in our relationships because we do not need to fix it. We don't need to solve it. We don't need to explain it. We don't need to judge it or control it. Oh boy. Okay. How y'all feeling? Let's see. Coaching with Dr. Alicia right there. You can check me out if you're interested. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at Coaching with Dr. Alicia on Instagram. And if you want some more information, you can text LOVE, LOVE, to 87948. I had to double check that number because for some reason I always get the number all messed up. But anyway, let's continue on here. Practices. So he's talking about we got to practice this, right? Practice does not mean forcing yourself to improve, but trusting your potential to openness. All the suggestions for practices that follow have a single purpose: to provide a program of skillful means so that you can become a psychologically healthy and spiritually conscious adult alone, in one-on-one relationships, and in and for the world. In these practices, psychological and spiritual work are meant to be done not sequentially, but simultaneously. Yeah, I'm of the camp that some people say, I got to fix myself first in order to be in a relationship. And I do think there's some value to that. But I also think the fixing can happen simultaneously. I do think a relationship can be a healing way to heal. You can heal in a relationship. I really do feel that the person that you choose is there to teach you the lesson that you need to learn, specifically to you. It's tailored to you. So I think you can have corrective experiences in your current relationship. So don't feel like there's something wrong with me and I need to correct myself in order for me to start dating. I think the corrective experience happens in the relationship. There are other people who think differently, but I'm thinking that it can happen simultaneously. And so does this guy, David Richo. He feels that way too. All right. Okay. As we do our psychological work, we become more spiritually enlivened. As we engage in spiritual practices, we become more psychologically adept. Partners who work things out together with the help of therapeutic tools can greatly improve the psychological health of their relationship. Well, I couldn't agree with that more in the position that I'm in. I'm gonna tell y'all, I've seen this happen. I've seen couples really fall apart, and it'll be something really simple. I'll say, what is it that you need from your husband that you're not getting? And the wife will say, I just need a hug. I can't tell you how many times I've seen wives say, I need a hug. What does that tell us? That tells us that as a child, she may not have gotten the proper amount of affection. And part of the 5 A's is affection. And so maybe she needs, through her spouse, to give hugs. And it's beautiful to see in session another person saying, I really need a hug from my partner, and to see that person in session to actually provide a hug, it means a world of difference. I'll tell you, hug your partner, hug your children. That will that will alleviate a lot of it. It's that of a lack of affection between two people. Very interesting. I see this a lot in sessions. But spiritual practice together deepens the bond at the level of the soul. Damn. Okay. Soulmates, after all, are those whose spiritual paths have met. Sitting together in meditation makes a wonderful contribution to bonding, because mutual commitment to mindfulness is a tool for tending a relationship. And I also think it's the case with prayer. I've seen a lot of couples pray together, particularly Muslim couples. I think the Muslim religion is just embedded in it, that praying 5 times a day. It's almost like I think we should meditate 5 times a day, honestly. I think it would, if the whole world did that, we'd be a much peaceful place. And I'm sorry, but I feel like the Muslim religion is probably, and I've studied all religions in my work as a social worker, and I teach it in my classes. And I think the most peaceful religion I've ever come in contact with is the Muslim religion. And I think it's ironic that a lot of times the Muslim religion is being connected to something that's very unpeaceful. But I think that that's bizarre to me, knowing what I know about that religion. So to be able to pray 5 times a day, I mean, you stop whatever fighting you're doing with your partner, you stop so that you can sit and pray together. I mean, that's gotta be healing. So, I mean, we need to take up some of these practices that these other religions have tools, phenomenal tools. I highly recommend it. Not a bad thing. Okay, powerful tool for tending a relationship is this mindful commitment to meditation and prayer. All of that definitely helps to bring couples together, right? So to sit in meditation is a relationship practice, not just a spiritual practice. So he's saying, yeah, I mean, it's good to do it spiritually, but to do it with your partner is come on, that helps to bring people together. So he goes on. I'm going to skip a couple of paragraphs. He talks about he gives examples of how partners need to work on this with each other. You may want to discuss your practices with one person you trust in addition to your partner. So he's given like different outlines for this, but I'm going to skip down to the bottom here because it's already at the top of the hour. At the bottom of 43, the practices, whatever they are, right, show us our vast potential to be healthy adults who know how to love. I think that's really fascinating because so many times when we get triggered in our relationships, we act real childish. And it's funny because it's almost like you go back to the wounded child, the age of the wounded child you go back to, and I think if we're not mindful of this, we don't see it happening. It's a dynamic that happens in relationships, is that we go back to the injured person. And so I just think being mindful of when you're doing this, you could say, hey, wait a minute, I now have to resist the urge to act like a spoiled little brat. I have to resist the urge to do that. And I think that's pretty cool that we can become more conscious of how our ego is getting involved in our ability to be healthy adults in relationships. They also show us where our constrictions about and resistance to love may be lurking. Yeah, you're not very lovable. You're not very lovable in that point. The practices raise our self-esteem, as we observe ourselves acting our potential for love and letting go of our barriers to it. Wow, it's so interesting because what this is saying is that the issues you're experiencing in your relationships is you. You're the problem sometimes. We have to take ownership of our part in why relationships aren't going well, long before we need to start pointing the finger at another person, right? So, so we need to understand how we play a part in the barriers that keep us from loving. No matter how inadequate or flawed we imagine ourselves to be, nobody's perfect, right? We have it in us to find wholeness. The words and practices of this book offers moments of repair and new adjustments. So it don't matter what's happened in the past. There is something you can do right now that can help you with everything that's going on in your relationships. You can repair any broken relationship can be repaired if you use these tools. So we can be on the lookout for any way we might be doing that repair. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So Kenyatta, hey, so we're reading this book, How to Be an Adult in Relationships. I think this is a book everybody in these here United States of America need to incorporate in how we treat each other. We are in a brutal election cycle. I almost don't even ever want to turn my phone on or my TV on or tune into what's going on because we are not living as a country in this way. I just will put that to say love's in need of love in America. Okay, so what did I write? Because some of it is subconscious. We need to be more conscious of things, right? The practice sections expand on the ideas and themes that have been explored. So he's talking about what the rest of the chapter looks like. We know that repetition of inner verdicts creates ruts in our mind. Repetition. So shout out to the late great Brother Panic. He was one of my teachers. He talked about repetition being what programs your mind, right? One way of programming your subconscious mind is repetition. And so that's one thing, we have to practice these things, right? We keep going back to old beliefs about ourselves, old unhelpful habits directing our behavior. We can create new neural pathways, even as adults. You can teach an old dog new tricks. There we go. And I know you can. You can teach an old dog new tricks. We can create new neural pathways through repetition. That is practicing new attitudes and behaviors. The more we repeat our helpful affirmations and actions, the more deeply we embed new resources. It's never too late. Likewise, we can awaken our prefrontal cortex, best evaluation of us, when we move from thinking ourselves as softies to affirming ourselves as hardy. Yeah, I think that if you start to incorporate some of these practices, you'll start to see results. And when you see results, you start to look at yourself differently. Like, wow, I am capable of healthy relationships. That just because my past is something that I know has damaged me in some way, I can heal by just carrying out these practices. And I really do think that these practices are contagious. Like if you start giving someone the 5 keys to mindful loving, they'll give it back to you. And I mean, I think there's the beauty in that. It's like, wow, this person is paying attention to me. I want to pay attention to them. And you could just you making this change can change the dynamic of any relationship that's failing. So it's on you to change it, right? When our brain tells us the same old tale of our victimhood, we wind up believing we are weak. And let me tell you, this is my definition of the devil and evil. To me, the devil is nothing outside of yourself. The devil is, as far as I'm concerned, negative thoughts about yourself. That's the devil. Because what it does, it stops you from stepping into your Christ consciousness, your God-like state. And that's my belief about humankind. Like all of us can become like Christ. And what we have to do is we have to recognize how our negative thoughts, which is nothing to me, is evil, the devil and the evil, it is outside of ourselves. We have to stop thinking that it's outside of ourselves. Really what it is negative thoughts that we have in ourselves. So that's I could elaborate a little more, but that's sort of my orientation, because when you step into your own power, that's when you're stepping into your ability to be Christ-like. And if the Bible says anything, and all the biblical texts, I mean, there's the Quran, there's all these texts, they really to give the same story. If you do comparative religions, you realize it's the same story repeated over and over again. But it really, I think it really is a blueprint of how you can achieve and be anything you ever wanted to be. So you have your own power, and that's how it's activated, right? Finally, be sure to notice your bodily sensations as you read this book. So he's telling you, as we go through these books, and this is for everybody, right? You're listening to this, your body is telling you what's happening to you, right? These sensations tell you so much about where your work is, what is holding you back, and what holds you. And your body sensations, where do you feel it? Is it in your head? Is it in your stomach? Some people feel it in their back. You know, what is coming up for you as we go through some of this? So he's getting you prepared for what the daily practices would be. Oh gosh. Okay, it's already top of the hour. I think we're going to wrap it up here. Text LOVE, LOVE to 87948. You will get information about me I'll send you some free stuff. I know you get a free copy of my husband's book, Financial Lovemaking. And if you are interested in reaching out to me, you can go to coachingwithdralicia.com. I work with couples and individuals. And you can follow me on Instagram at Coaching with Dr. Alicia. This is the end of part 4, How to Be an Adult in Relationships, The 5 Keys to Mindful Loving by David Richo, a fellow therapist. And we have concluded, if you want to get the book, we're at the bottom of page 44. We're going to start on page 45. And let's see, am I busy next week? I ain't busy next week. Let me look at my calendar. Oh, I'm not doing anything next week. So I'll be back next Sunday. We'll go through all of the practices that he talks about. Woo boy, the practices. And so I don't know. I really feel like share this with your partner. Share this video. If you liked it, if you learned something, please hit the thumbs up button. I really appreciate that. And I thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.